genomics consults. And that has really been what I consider the highlight of my career, the most exciting thing that I've done with my career in pharmacy. So I've been doing that consulting through my business since 2021. And I'm also on the staff of Precision Medicine Hero, which is an academy that was founded by Dr. Jamie Wilkie, and where we train pharmacists on how to implement pharmacogenomics in their own consulting businesses. And to date, we have trained over 350 pharmacists on how to do that in the United States and around the world. And my most recent role is that I am the Chief Pharmacogenomics Officer for Antares Genomics in Cape Town. So we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. So what is pharmacogenomics? Pharmacogenomics is the study of how our genes or our DNA can actually affect our response to drugs. So about 20 to 30 years ago, when they were mapping the human genome, they discovered several genes which are directly responsible for the metabolism of drugs and the handling of those drugs in the body, whether it be activating those drugs, if they're prodrugs, or breaking down those drugs and keeping them from becoming toxic in the patient. So the field combines pharmacology and genomics and helps us to develop effective, safe medications that can be prescribed based on a person's genetic makeup. So this picture here just gives a little bit more description into what we're doing here with pharmacogenomics. We see the group of people in the middle. This is the whole population, and we give the same patients the same medication for the same disease, and we can see a variety of different responses. We can see a group of patients that may have a benefit from the drug and no toxicity. Now that's the ideal situation. On the bottom right, you can see that the patient doesn't have any toxicity from the drug, but they also don't have any benefit. So, at least they're not being harmed by the drug, but they're really not being benefited. We see the patients in yellow that they have benefit, but they also have toxicity. And then you can have a group of patients that have toxicity and no benefit. And of course, that's the worst case scenario. So using pharmacogenomics or looking at the patient's genetic information can allow us to tailor or to personalize therapy to each patient. So you can see that taking genetics into consideration, that one patient may require a standard dose of a medication. One patient may require half a dose. Another patient may require 3 times the normal dose to get the same effect. And then you may have one patient that won't respond to this drug at all and needs a completely different drug, which would be represented by the patient at the bottom. So when we use pharmacogenetics to help us inform our prescribing decision, you can kind of see a contrast. You see a group of patients that get traditional treatment. We are going by what the guidelines recommend, first line, second line, that sort of thing. Pretty much everyone is treated the same. They're given the same medication, the same dose, and it's really a trial and error approach. But typically in the past, we know that patients don't respond the same to medications. So knowing their genetic factors, if you have those, you can actually predict which patients are going to respond to certain medications, whether they may need a higher or a lower dose than normal, or whether the drug is not even likely to work for them, or it may be too toxic for them. And for those patients, we can predict that and choose a completely different drug or a drug from another class instead, and we can avoid that whole trial and error process. So how is PGX useful? It can help us identify patients where drugs are likely ineffective. It can help us identify when you have patients that are at high risk of adverse effects. Everyone mute themselves, please. I'm having a lot of feedback. Thank you. We can reduce the trial and error, the time to reach treatment goals. We actually have some recent studies that show that we can reduce healthcare costs, reduce unnecessary doctor visits. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think we can hear you now.
Okay. So we know that PGX is useful to identify drugs that are ineffective, identify risk of side effects, reduce trial and error, reduce healthcare costs, and this can improve compliance, improve the confidence in the treatment plan. And when patients are more compliant and more confident, then they are more likely to experience treatment success. And then their provider is having a more efficient clinic and practice, and they can focus on other patients' issues. So another way that PGX is useful is there are currently over 300 drug products which contain PGX information in their FDA-approved package insert. So these drugs are not uncommon, and the drugs with the most substantial amount of evidence do have clinical guidelines in the presence of certain genetic features. And in the United States, we actually have an organization which publishes and regularly updates clinical guidelines where we can take that genetic information and apply it to the patient and make recommendations for their drug therapy. And those are called the CPIC guidelines. And I've got the website listed here for that, for anyone that is interested in looking at those clinical guidelines. So I wanted to just go through a few quick cases just to show you what using pharmacogenomics can look like in clinical practice and the type of impact it can have for patients. The first example would be a drug called Plavix, and the gene that is associated with that drug is CYP2C19. Now, these are the cytochrome P450 enzymes that are in your liver and are responsible for our drug metabolism. And so Plavix is actually a prodrug. And so Plavix is going to require activation by CYP2C19 to be able to transform into the active form. And if you have a patient that does not have enough enzyme activity through this particular gene, this enzyme system, if they're an intermediate or a poor metabolizer, then Plavix is not likely to form enough of the active ingredient in those patients. So this puts those patients at an increased risk of having a second heart attack or a stroke, which can be caused by a blood clot forming around a stent. Plavix is used in patients that have had a heart attack and have a stent placed. So your body recognizes that stent as a foreign object and starts forming a clot around it. Plavix is intended to prevent that clot formation, but if you have these particular patients, they cannot activate the drug, and there are actually examples of lawsuits that have occurred in patients that have these genetic findings, but they were put on Plavix, and the patients actually passed away because the drug was ineffective for them. The second example case is an oncology case. I've got an extensive background in oncology, and one of the most important genes in this population is called DPYD. The drug we're going to talk about is 5-fluorouracil, which is abbreviated 5-FU, and Xeloda is actually the oral prodrug of that particular compound. These are used very commonly in cancer clinics to treat primarily colorectal cancer, sometimes breast cancer or other GI-related cancers. And 5-FU works by irreversibly blocking enzymes which cause cell death. In turn, that causes cell death. And the DPYD enzyme is the primary one that's responsible for breaking 5-FU down and removing it from the body. So if you have a patient with a DPYD deficiency and they get this chemotherapy, it can actually lead to severe toxicity or death. And the reason for that is that the drug is building up in the patient's blood and exerting its toxic effects. We know that chemotherapy is actually well-controlled poison, is basically what chemotherapy is. If we're not able to metabolize that and it's hanging around in the blood, we're actually going to mimic an overdose in these patients. Even if you give them a normal dose, it's going to mimic an overdose situation. And that's exactly what happens if you give a patient who is an intermediate or a poor metabolizer these drugs. They would actually recommend using an alternative agent or using a strongly reduced dose of the medication. The third case is Paxil and CYP2D6. Paxil is used for anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other conditions as well. Paxil is actually an active drug, and it's an SSRI is what it's called, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And in order for it to be removed appropriately from our body, they have to have enough enzyme activity through the CYP2D6 system. If a patient is an ultra-rapid metabolizer, the drug will be deactivated too quickly, and so Paxil would be ineffective in these patients, and they would have a very high likelihood of therapeutic failure. So in this case, the guidelines would actually recommend, if you know someone is an ultra-rapid metabolizer through this system, not to even try this drug, but to choose an alternative agent that is not primarily metabolized through CYP2D6, such as Zoloft. And the last case I wanted to talk about is tramadol and the same enzyme system, CYP2D6. Tramadol is a pain medication, and it is a prodrug. It's used for various different conditions. It's an opioid analgesic, and CYP2D6 is also responsible for converting this drug to its active form. If a patient is an ultra-rapid metabolizer, the drug will be converted too quickly. So we're getting a whole lot of active drug formed at once, and there's a high risk of toxicity in this case. So guidelines would recommend using a non-codeine opioid alternative such as morphine in this case. So how we're talking about metabolizing function, and we're talking about poor metabolizer, ultra-rapid metabolizer. How is this metabolizing function determined? What we do is we look at the genetic findings, and we know that certain findings are associated with either more or less activity through that enzyme system. So there are several organizations and universities that have done studies, and they have determined which particular genetic variants are increased activity versus reduced activity. And we can actually quantify that. We can predict response based on which variant of that gene the patient carries. So we're able to classify patients by their metabolizer status. And then from there, we can actually make specific recommendations on which drug to use, in some cases, which dose to use, or whether we need to try a completely different medication. So just an idea of what the testing cycle for this looks like. Pharmacogenomic tests can be done in a variety of ways. Most companies are going to use either a cheek swab or a saliva collection from the patient. You can also do a blood draw. So we get the biomaterial from the patient, we send it to the lab. The lab is going to analyze the data and generate a report. Now, most testing companies are going to print out a report that's anywhere from 30 to 40 pages long. The actual genetic results are usually only a page or two of that. The rest of the report is usually a pretty lengthy discussion of which drugs to use, and the actual genetic information is only a page or two. From there, we're going to get the results back. The lab that I'm working with in South Africa, we're actually going to be incorporating pharmacists into our model, and the pharmacist is going to do a consult on every single PGX test that's done. And what that means is for every 30 to 40 page report and the results that we get back, a PGX certified pharmacist is going to review that and condense all that down into a 1 to 2 page clinical recommendation for that patient's physician. This is really going to be a game changer in the industry, because it really makes implementation seamless for those providers. They have an expert that's giving them a recommendation that they can follow if they, want to do that for their patients. They don't have to, be certified in pharmacogenomics. They can just trust the pharmacist that's going to help them and be their expert. So from there, we're going to review test results with patients, develop a personalized treatment plan, and then from there, we're just going to see the benefits for the patient from those results. Now, we know that there are several things which can affect the patient's reality when they're taking drug therapy. We've all known about the renal and the liver function, even foods, drug-drug interactions, some lifestyle choices that patients make. But now we know that this genetic piece is very important, and it can help explain some of these failures, some of these toxicities that haven't been explained by anything else in the past. As pharmacists, we're drug experts. We're the ones that should be responsible for knowing this. We're the ones that are the best equipped to incorporate this into an overall look at the patient's drug therapy to make sure everything's being considered. So I'm pharmacist #1 fan in this space for sure, because I think that it's just natural for us to adopt this and implement this. I get this question a lot: why aren't more doctors using PGX? Many of them just aren't aware of it, and that's something I'm passionate about, is bringing awareness and posting content to the public to just make people aware that this exists, that it's legitimate, that we need to be doing it. Some physicians aren't confident in their ability to interpret test results. And that's where I think having a pharmacist integrated is crucial. We can help these physicians out. They don't have time to specialize in something else. They just need somebody to help them implement. Some physicians are resistant to changing their practice, but I feel like as the expert, if we offer to help them, then they won't have to change their practice. We would just be joining in and helping them. So this is why I started my business. I am trained and ready to assist providers. I'll actually be training pharmacists in Africa on how to do this as well through our lab as consultants. I do provide consults directly with patients. I spend time educating providers and the public, and I feel it's very important for everyone to benefit from this. I have some links here where I got some of my information for this presentation. And the last link there is my business website. I have some general blogs and YouTube videos about pharmacogenomics for anyone who's interested. This is a QR code where you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you're interested. I'd love for you to follow me there if you don't already. And also have listed here my email, and you can feel free to contact me anyway if you have any questions about me, what I'm doing, or about the lab I'm joining in South Africa or our projects that we're working on. We will be partnering with every African country to implement the 100,000 Genomes Project. I'll be training pharmacists on how to do these consults for pharmacogenomics, and I'd love to hear from you. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time. McLawrence, do you have a question? I can't hear you, McLawrence, if you're talking.
Yes, I was mute, but now I'm open. So mine is just a contribution, not really a question. To the Zambian audience, those that are following from Zambia, the good news is, so genomics is something that was recently, okay, it's being rolled out. So very few countries probably may have it at the best, which we desire. But the good news for those that are in Zambia and Southern Africa is that the University of Zambia has now started to enroll for a postgraduate master's program in which those that are interested can enroll. And currently, because it just started, so people can even stand a chance of getting some scholarships. So it's a hot cake and quickly up for grabs. Those that are interested can quickly just go to the website and furnish themselves with more details and grab this opportunity while it lasts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Jennifer. Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay. I noticed that might not be evening in your place. I'm speaking from Nigeria, and my name is Bolu Atife Jimo. So I'm a pharmacy student in final year. I'm really passionate about pharmacogenomics. So basically, I have two questions. So the first one is about the insurance coverage for pharmacogenomics, because I learned it's more of like a new, not really new, but more of like a new field coming up, and the insurance companies and institutions don't really like.
Were you done with your question? I think it put you back on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
So the insurance, most insurance companies don't like take up pharmacogenomics into their coverage. So like what are the interventions, or what are the things we can bring up to solve and come that solution? And then the second question is about you mentioned something about training and consultation you are offering for people in Africa. So I just wanted to mention, since I'm I'm going to be graduating very soon, I'm becoming a pharmacist. So I would just like to someone passionate about pharmacy, pharmacogenomics. I'd like to see if there are any opportunities for recent graduates. Thank you.
Sure. I can speak to insurance coverage in the United States because that's where I am. Obviously, I know a little bit more about that. I can speak a little bit to the situation going on in Africa from what I have gathered working with my lab. As far as the United States, the coverage is pretty good depending on what we're treating the patient for, what we're treating the patient with. So for example, if you have a cancer patient and you're wanting to treat them with 5-fluorouracil or Xeloda, most insurance will cover that test for the patient because they know the risk with that situation. But most insurance, even here, is going to have really strict rules about when they'll cover it, when they won't. As far as the situation in Africa, I know in South Africa, there is at least one medical aid that will cover for some genomic testing, specifically in lung cancer and colorectal cancer. And they even state on their website that they're likely to expand coverage for that as time goes on. So that's exciting. It's challenging because a lot of patients that, especially ones that want to be proactive, they are having to pay cash for this. The challenge, even in the United States, people can use flexible spending account dollars or tax-free dollars to pay for this as a medical expense. So, we know it can save money. We know it can save hospitalizations. It can save lives. So it's definitely something that's worth investing in, but it's not always really easy to convince people to invest in their health and to spend money for something like this. They feel like insurance should cover it. And I do too. We're just not to that point yet where it's very widespread. So as far as training opportunities in Africa, I am actually working on an online course for African healthcare providers. And it's the primary goal of it is going to be to train physicians on how to implement pharmacogenomics in their practice. But it will also be targeted to pharmacists in Africa who want to work as consultants for Onterris Genomics, which is the lab I'm working for in Cape Town. So we will eventually, in the next few months, be hiring some pharmacist consultants that I will train. And so I'm developing a course to help train those pharmacists on how to do these consults. But there are lots of online courses where you can get certifications in pharmacogenomics. And like McLawrence stated, at the University of Zambia, they will be starting a master's program in PGX in the 2024 school year. So I'm very excited because I'm partnering with them as well, and I'm excited to see that program get started as well. Any other questions? Trying to see if I see any other hands raised. I don't think I do. But I will pop my email into the chat and my LinkedIn. For anyone that wants to connect with me later or send me a message later, I would love to hear from you. And I'm grateful to have been here today. And I will let the next speaker start, or the next introduction.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you very much for being here. We're really, really grateful. And yeah, for those asking about the pharmacogenomic stuff, yeah, Pharma-Tether is also currently discussing with Jennifer about bringing pharmacogenomics to Nigeria. So with time, you will get to hear the information about pharmacogenomics from us. Meanwhile, Daphne, I don't know if you are there, you can introduce our second speaker. Thank you very much, Jennifer. God bless you. We are glad to have you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We've actually learned a lot tonight, and it's time to listen to the second speaker. And before that, I'll be taking a brief introduction of her. Okay, so for tonight, for the second speaker, I'll be having the honor to introduce pharmacist Dr. Sue Ojega, and she'll be taking us on telepharmacy. Beyond that professional accomplishments, she is a dedicated mother of 5 children who have inspired her to expand our educational outreach to all ages. She is creating a series of children's books that simplifies complex health topics and makes them relatable and applicable to both children and adults. Her commitment to patient advocacy and promoting an active role in health and well-being is at the heart of her work, both as a healthcare professional and an author. Follow Dr. Ojega journey towards achieving optimal health and wellness for all through our concierge services, educational resources, and compassionate approach to healthcare. Um, Guys, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be having Dr. Sue Ojega, pharmacist Dr. Sue Ojega now. So, Ma, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Ma. You're welcome, Ma.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and to speak with all of you. And good evening to you all. I'm on the other side of the world, so it's a sunny, really, really hot day here in Texas. And unfortunately, I'm in a really cold office right now, so I'm freezing. I was finishing up a case with one of my providers I'm working with, so I decided to just take my call inside the office. And so if you see me trembling, it's a little cold in here, but it's a pleasure to be with you all. And I'm really excited to share my presentation with you. And thank you, Jen, for that wonderful presentation. I always learn so much from her. I'm actually a colleague with her. We met on the other side here on our PGX course. So lots of wonderful information. And I will be sharing my screen with you all. Can you guys all see my screen? Should be a little bigger. Okay, perfect. Oops. All good? Screen sharing? Okay. So welcome to the presentation on telepharmacy. And in very simplified terms, telepharmacy is, oh, can everyone see it? Sorry, just want to make sure everyone's seeing the screen. If I go forward.
Sue, I'm only seeing a black screen.
Oh no, what did I do? Let's go back. Screen share. How about now? Is it showing?
No, it just says that you're screen sharing, but it's just a black screen. I don't know why.
Oh no, I apologize for that. Everything was working before, and now, of course. I'm probably going to have to do it just a visual. I'll give you guys a lot of info then. I'll just read it out and present it without the slides. I could send it to anyone after the presentation. That way we could all share the information, but it looks like it's probably my internet in here, or it's blocking some of the windows to be shown. Okay, still seeing the black screen? Okay.
I'm just seeing the Zoom participants.
Okay. All right, no worries. We'll make do with what we have here. Okay, so welcome to telepharmacy, just like how we are on a call right now and we have the ability to connect from different parts of the world. We're able to do this with our health. So in basic terms, it's connecting with our patients and connecting our providers to provide a service. So in very simplified terms, that's telepharmacy. A brief introduction of myself. I've been in practice for 15 years, and I've been in the retail space working in a pharmacy, dispensing medications, and I decided to leave where I was and provide a higher level service and provide care to patients. And that's where I formed my service and my business of Pharma-Sue, and I provide concierge services for patients. So I work directly with primarily physicians, and I provide care in that term and also concierge services one-on-one with patients as well. And working with them, mainly the mainstay was also with PGX as well, in helping them get the right medicine depending on their genetics and personalizing their health based on that information, because we're all different. We're going to produce different results to our medicine, like you, Miss Dr. Jennifer, just explained, where that should be personalized and not having a one-size-fits-all healthcare. And beyond that, I am a mom also, and that has definitely been a juggle, trying to balance work-life balance and taking care of kids and home life. So I wanted to incorporate a different side of healthcare and try to make it fun and enjoyable, where they could also learn something from it and make them interested in science and math. And incorporating them into this led me to the creation of writing children's books. So I recently published a book on pharmacogenomics, explaining that in very simplified terms to a point where it's understandable to them and adults who are not aware of the topic. And it's called The Pharma Heroes. And I'll gladly put the link in the chat as well. And I want to share with you guys as well a copy, because it is a very fun read to understand the topic and to make it fun and exciting for kids. So that was the last project I worked on as well. So for today's agenda, I'll be explaining what telepharmacy is, how it can improve patient care, the business of telepharmacy, setting up a telepharmacy, regulations as well, and concluding and finalizing with question and answers. So what exactly is telepharmacy? It's the remote provision of pharmaceutical care through the use of technology. It connects patients in medically underserved areas with pharmacists, enabling access to vital pharmacy services without the need for in-person visits. So like very technological words and lots of definitions here, but connecting pharmacists with their patients to provide a service remotely. So the role in healthcare delivery, it fills the gaps in the healthcare access, particularly in underserved areas. And underserved meaning not in very rural all the time. It could be geographically underserved, clinical naive patients, or patients who are not able to always make that trip to a physical office to see a doctor, but allowing patients to consult with pharmacists remotely. So having that ability to do it in their own comforts of their home, where they're able to access or have access to internet connection and be able to speak with their providers in their own comfort. So it facilitates the medication management, counseling, and monitoring, leading to improved patient outcomes and medication adherence. So if we have the ability to connect with our patients and be able to help them virtually in their own comfort, hopefully the mainstay of taking away or having that additional service, you would want extremely beneficial results, meaning that you would want the patients to have maximum benefits from their health. So you're basically taking away all the nuances of going to the doctor's office, traveling there, spending money to get there, or having the in-betweens of getting to a physical office and just being present for them and very convenient. So what is telepharmacy and the benefits? So the benefits, it increases accessibility to pharmacy services, especially for those who face these barriers such as geography or have limited mobility. Sometimes they're not always able to easily get to an office where someone would have, depending on transportation, or they need assistance from family members or outside sources taking public transportation. So it definitely helps with those cases. It enhances patients' convenience, improving medication safety, and provides timely interventions. So if you're able to nix all of those in-betweens, that you could also provide patient care at UNMAS. So additional benefits. So if you have extended admittance to drug store administrations, you could set it up for the patient where they're able to have a very seamless process in getting their medications, getting the consultations that they need, getting the directions and explaining how they were supposed to take these medications and what's the questions they may have. So you could address all those concerns and not have anything slip through the cracks where they're depending on, having different things come up where they're having gaps in therapy. So there's definitely a lot of drug compliance when you have telepharmacy services. And you also have a lot more availability and accessibility to drugstore support because you're in direct communication where you're providing all of these services and there's no gaps, as we mentioned. So some of the challenges that we may see when we're providing care. Medically underserved areas sometimes experience limited access to quality healthcare services due to remoteness, shortness of healthcare professionals, or lack of resources. So sometimes when we go out to very rural areas where there is no connection, or like in my case, for example, where I guess the server was blocked off and not being able to physically see or directly connect, where one of the main setbacks would be the connection, not having all patients have an internet source or different provider to have these type of services. Not all patients have communication devices such as cell phones or laptops, computers. So that's another barrier we have to consider as well. And shortages of healthcare professionals, for example, not many hospitals or pharmacies or pharmacists are equipped or able to perform services through telehealth. So that's one of the barriers we have to consider as well. And I did have a representation of the map showing globally, as far as having high use of telepharmacy services, primarily the Eastern Asian continent and those countries in the eastern side have a lot more prevalence of having telepharmacy, with the US, Canada, Mexico falling second, and countries in South America and Africa coming in last. So there is a lot of room still for growth and a lot of benefits still showing and prominence of it increasing as well. So there is room for growth for sure, depending on the availability and implementing these services. On overcoming geographical barriers, telepharmacy enables patients in underserved areas to receive essential pharmacy service remotely. Pharmacists can remotely review medication orders. They could provide counseling. They can monitor patients' medications, adherence, bridging the gap in care. So it does show a lot of benefits and a lot of room for growth. Some of the barriers also you need to overcome when setting up some of the services. And the need has to exist. So if a patient is struggling to get, or a certain area is struggling to implement or access their physician, and telepharmacy services would definitely provide benefit to that area, that is something to look into to implement into that area, geographical area or the office or into their systems that they already have in place. Another thing to consider is the standard operating procedures. You need to set up certain procedures to take in to train your staff to make sure that they're fully aware of how to implement these services and how to direct or triage patients coming in and provide the care, because it's no longer as personal now because you're not seeing a patient physically or in front of you. So you could easily lose touch with providing personal care. So definitely having that ability to connect with your patients and be able to show that you're genuine and you're providing a service that will benefit them. So staff training is very important. And lastly, the laws and regulations for implementing telepharmacy. Depending on the area, there are governing laws that need to be taken into account because of certain areas where we're practicing, making sure that everything is going to be legally abiding to the governing laws of that state and country. So on the business end of telepharmacy now, some financial advantages. In implementing telepharmacy services offers cost savings for healthcare organizations. It reduces the need for physical infrastructure and staffing at every location. So now after COVID, or especially in the US, we've seen that a lot of companies have gone to work at home or hybrid positions. Same as well in the healthcare. It's changed dramatically or opened our eyes to having a lot of opportunities to provide services that don't necessarily need to be in person. And we could offer this as a face-to-face, as a telepharmacy service and provide those care and also cut costs where you don't have to have a physical location. You don't have to have certain things to be in person and allocate those costs to provide services like this. So that's one way to shift a redirect cost for benefit as well. So telepharmacy can also lead to a reduction in medication errors, readmission, and unnecessary hospital visits when cost-saving benefits arise from improved medication management, enhanced patient education, and increased medication adherence. So it reduces a lot of errors, readmission, and unnecessary hospital visits because we're able to connect with our patients and the rest of the team to negate any of those issues that might come up or able to address any of those issues directly with them, and having the entire team on one platform or one platform to discuss or to go through. Next, in the revenue generation. Telepharmacy can attract more patients by offering convenient and accessible pharmacy services. It expands on the reach of pharmacy organizations to larger population, potentially increasing revenue streams. So if we're able to provide services that are remote, such as telepharmacy services, we're able to connect with multiple states and countries. So it does have a lot of potential there now. It's not just a one-on-one consultation you're having with your patients. It could go global and you're able to connect on massive levels. So it's no longer just a one-on-one. So lots of room there for growth and having these services in areas where before you're not able to have or grow in that scale. Okay, some of the barriers we might see in the financial side. While it offers financial advantages, there are potential barriers and challenges to consider. Initial setup costs. There's one, technological infrastructure requirements. Compliance with telepharmacy regulations may also pose challenges. So although there are lots of benefits, there are some setup costs that are involved. You have to make sure you have the software, the team to make sure to take in all of the incoming questions or all the incoming patients or the setup, making sure you're offering, going back to the SOPs that we spoke about before is very important. And here. So some of the things that you have to consider as well is, even though it seems very massive in terms of reach, always maintaining the standards of quality is important when you're setting up telepharmacy, because like we mentioned before, it does have room to lose that personable effect that we have with our patients. So maintaining the quality assurance that we put into place and having that for each of our patients that we help or we come in contact with it. So training is definitely important, or is the mainstay in making sure everything runs smoothly. There's pharmacists that compose of the team, there's technicians and clerks who could also be part of it to make sure everything runs efficiently. So a basic understanding of how it would work, the telepharmacy services, you would receive an order electronically or by fax or phone, verifying the order for accuracy, appropriateness, and safety, and conducting the medication counseling sessions with our patients, and finally monitoring and following up with our patients to ensure that medication adherence are addressed or any concerns are addressed. All while doing this as well, another factor you have to make sure that you have implemented into the system is a secure platform. So discussing and having technology has a lot of room for people to infiltrate those structures. So making sure that the platform that you're using is compliant with your legal regulations. For us, we have to have everything HIPAA compliant, privacy protected. So discussing the technology and software used for secure communication and data exchanges within the telepharmacy platform protects the patient's information. So a lot of concern patients might have are a little hesitant in doing something over the phone or over the internet connections is their privacy protection. So making sure that is secure is very important as well. And going into the regulations now. So there's ways that we can implement it into the hospital systems, community pharmacies, and long-term care facilities, and private practices as well. So having the systems built out to handle the growth where is important, and that's where the infrastructure playing out and the standard operating policies are important there. And depending on the area you're practicing or looking to cover, having your governing practices or legal implications looked at is important as well, because if the government is not going to allow certain communication or data to be transmitted, depending on the state and countries, that's one of the legal implications that has to be researched. So that is something to look into when setting up practice. And remote prescribing, depending on the laws as well for prescribers, if they have the ability to provide or prescribe remotely. That's one of the things. Some prescribers are limited to how they could write prescriptions in some states and countries. So if they have ability to do this electronically, that's something that should be researched before having them be involved in the practice. And next slide is mentioning on the privacy and security considerations as we spoke of. And there's always updates. So like many things in healthcare, there's always changes, there's always updates. So staying up to date on those records are very important, because you don't want to get fined. You don't want to stay behind and miss an update as far as updating software, for example, if there's a leak in data that might go out. So always keeping up to date and making sure your systems are safe and patients are able to still trust you to provide these services, because it is your reputation that would be online. So always making sure that is up to date and taken care of. And concluding, there's many benefits to telepharmacy and improving healthcare. You have an ability to reach patients throughout the world and be able to provide a service and help them stay compliant on their therapies and medications through the comfort of your own home. And like most of us, we all have some type of technology, or we're able to connect on some device. So it's very convenient, but there also are some setbacks as well in areas that are not able to have these access or have abilities to do this. So that's one of the limiting factors for underserved areas. And concluding, it is a service that is definitely beneficial to implement. And for further information, I'll be more than happy to send over this slide deck since it didn't send through. But there's a lot of ways to implement it into your practice, or consider doing it for another larger scale, as we spoke of on the hospital base or physician offices. So lots of ways to provide exceptional patient care there. And if you have any questions or any questions or concerns, I would definitely love to take some questions for anyone. I'm going to also include my email address as well for anyone who wants to connect with me or ask any questions there. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can find me under my name. And thank you all so much. And thank you for being patient with me while my slides didn't load, but I appreciate it. Any questions I could take? Yes.
Thank
You
you
could
very
just-
much. You, we are we are more than happy to have you this night. In fact, understandable now and how to implement it and the likes. We are very happy to have you. And to the audience, if you have any questions, please kindly send them to the chat box, and we'll read them out accordingly to our speaker, so she can address each and every one of them. Thank you very much, from Dr. Sue.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's look at the chat box and see the questions.
Yes. So the communication involves verbal and nonverbal communication during patient caregiving. Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, for the first question, communication involves verbal and nonverbal communication during patient clerking, especially for aged patients and newly commenced patients with pharmacists. So how does telepharmacy intend to handle this? So having that team that we spoke about and having certain questions go through our technicians or our clerks to be able to walk them through the process of guiding them how this is supposed to work. Because some elderly patients or some patients who are not understanding, they are more familiar with having a one-on-one conversation with their provider, are not too comfortable with having a conversation over the phone or the internet like how we are. So having that reassured and having our staff be able to explain this and go through the stages of how they're going to meet their pharmacist, how they're going to get the care, and the follow-up is definitely important as well, because it's continuous. It's not just one time you see a patient and then wave goodbye and that's it. It's definitely having those procedures implemented into practice. Also, can the pharmacist ensure he can still double check and correct drug food interactions and other medication errors if they aren't seeing the patient directly? Yes. So having all of their medications, including prescriptions, over-the-counters, herbal supplements, any type of allergies they may have, and having the importance of having, if you do have a PGX test, having that incorporated into an EHR. So it's available for all of their providers to see when they're writing prescriptions or offering care, and having a one system to go by instead of, having polypharmacy where they're prescribed one thing here and then another pharmacy down another side of the road might have something else. So having it all one platform would negate any of those interactions there. Are there guidelines for setting up telepharmacy if your workplace doesn't have one, but wants to have one? Depending on the area where you're practicing and the governing laws, there are going to be some guidelines because of the reach that you're going to cover for patients, because that would all depend on the state where you're practicing and the country, what laws are restricting you or what implications they want you to follow. So you would have to research that depending on the area of reach and the practice. Thank you. I'm interested in telepharmacy. How do I get into it? Are there skills I need to have? What advice? So for myself personally, I'll give you a little bit of a background, how I started or like how it works a little in the States. It gets tricky with our state boards because we have different states within the US, and they all have different ways that they look at the law, or they look at pharmacists practicing in certain areas. For health coaches or for different people who offer service as coaching or advice, but don't practice under a health related profession, such as a pharmacist, it has different legal implications there. So when I started off, I was not providing medicine or medicinal or health related or giving advice as far as a doctor, unless I was collaborating with one. If, for example, I provided services as a health coach, I wouldn't have to follow certain regulations. So that's where you have to know how to kind of work with the law and the regulations you're under, because it does get very tricky. It's hard sometimes when you call our state boards or our pharmacy licensing. They sometimes don't have a clear answer for you, but it's all up to interpretation, and it does get very tricky, or sometimes it limits us to practice. But understanding and working with other prescribers or other practitioners within our field and collaborating on that platform as well is where you're able to get some resolution or some answers. But it does get a little tricky depending on the governing laws and how to interpret them, and sometimes it's hard to figure out find clear waters there. Let's see. Thank you. Can you throw one more light on telepharmacy regulations? I think I went a little bit more there. It's a lot of room for growth, lots of room to have for our patients or our provider care, but it's sometimes restricted because of the governing laws. But I'm sure with the benefits of it being out there now and a lot of practitioners seeing the benefits of it, that's not going to be the limiting factor. There's a lot of room still for it to be implemented in. So that should never be something to stop or restrict you from ever wanting to do this or implement it in. For pharmacists that want to venture into pharmacy, what are any guidelines? So for that specific questions, depending on, again, where you're practicing, I get that question quite often from some students who are studying abroad or they're interested in coming to the US to practice. Depending on the state where you're wanting to get licensure and where you're wanting to practice, look up the laws and regulations there. They'll give you a good background on what courses you need to complete or what testing you need to follow in order to get licensed as a pharmacist. Okay, in a country that has no online health record database of patient information like Nigeria, is it possible to implement telepharmacy? Because you emphasize this helps in monitoring drug use interaction. Yes. So if you don't see a system in place and there's nothing that you would stop you from, or no laws or regulations that are stopping you from doing, create a database or create a system or start small and build out, and just, you never know where it could lead you, because that is ultimately the answer. We want one platform that would have or house all of the information throughout all systems to have and hold these information, so there's no drug interactions, there's no duplications in therapies. So that would be ultimately the answer And if you don't see a system and you're able to do it, or you're able to create a database that could house this information, definitely go for it. That would be worth a lot. Okay. Any more questions or anything else I might have missed? Or it was a pleasure speaking with you all or being here. And I apologize again for the slides not showing through, but it's been absolutely amazing. And I think there's a lot of room still and lots of room for growth.
Okay, I just wait for like 4 minutes, and if there's no question, we can call it a day. Thank you very much, Dr. Siu. We are very much grateful to you for being here, taking out time from a busy schedule to be here, honoring our invitation. Yeah, we are very, very grateful to have you. And today, I think telepharmacy is one of the things that we really want to bring to Nigeria and talk about Pharma-Tether. And with this introduction today and the whole explanation you're giving so far, I think we have a solid foundation to work on. And I'm very sure the pharmacists in the house, they are seeing what I've been talking about for quite some time now. And yeah, we can start the work on telepharmacy and other areas of digital pharmacy practice, and then to increase and improve patient healthcare, patient outcome. That's basically why we are trying, and then to increase the reach of the number of people we are reaching out in Nigeria, increase the standards of healthcare service in Nigeria. I think with telefarms to be able to achieve that. So thank you very much, Dr. Seo. God bless you. I don't think there's any question from the audience again, and if there is any, I will probably send them to you across via the
Yes.
LinkedIn. Thank you very much for being here. God bless you. Yes, ma'am. I don't know. Okay, I think okay, I think from Jennifer is still there. Dr. Jennifer, hi, good evening. I'm sorry, it's actually evening here.
I'm here.
Hello. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you very much, Ma, for waiting. Oh my God. Thank you very much. We are very, very happy to have you and Dr. Siu today enlightening us on pharmacogenomics. Yeah, personalized treatment, and is something is new, and is something I think is very much important in Nigeria and in Africa at large. And thank God you're already working in Africa. So probably we still work on the collaboration we talked about, and bringing it to Nigeria, same as telepharmacy and the likes. So thank you very much for being here, and God bless you. We
My
really,
pleasure
really
to be
appreciate
here.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes. All right, so we can check them up on LinkedIn. Yes, the way their names are here, that's the same thing on LinkedIn. So just check them out on LinkedIn, connect with them. Yeah, trust me, you'll like their posts, you'll learn a lot. Like there are times I just go to LinkedIn to just check out their posts, read them and learn about telepharmacy, about personalized treatments for pharmacogenomics, and every other post they are going to make. I am so much further. I'm always eager to, see their posts. That's just the thing. So thank you very much. You can follow them on LinkedIn. Yeah. And God bless you all for being here. So tomorrow we have our Founders Day tomorrow. I'm very sure it's going to be a Twitter space. So you all can join, and we can discuss the growth of Nigeria healthcare and pharmacy practice in Nigeria, the way forward, what we need to do, what we can do to actually bring this change in Nigeria. So tomorrow by 7 p.m., let's all be here, and God bless you all. I think we can call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.